We then had an opportunity to talk to Mackenzie Scott. We got the call from her foundation, and they approached Community First Fund, and they asked the question, "Do you have any big projects in the in the horizon?" And of course, we say we do.
Credit unions often expand into adjacent business lines as a method of growth. It's unusual to see the opposite. Community First Fund of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is that rare example. As a $200 million asset CDFI, Community First Fund serves 18 counties in eastern Pennsylvania and the states of New Jersey and Delaware. Traditionally, they focused on commercial lending for small businesses and CRA low-income housing development. However, in 2022, the fund launched a credit union to address the further needs of their community. With us to discuss this is Jonathan Encarnacion, the Senior Vice President and Chief Retail Officer of Community First. Thank you for being with us, Jonathan.
No, I thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the opportunity to share and talk about the exciting news that we have regarding Community First Fund and what we call the a very unique enterprise, which is our credit union.
So I think it's worth looking at the history there. Community First Fund dates back to the early 90s, correct?
That is correct. And
Okay.
I have to say that at the time, I was the CEO and Executive Director of the Hispanic Center in Reading. And the reason why I mentioned that is because that was my first introduction to Community First Fund. At the time, we had a very unique initiative called the Weed and Seed initiative. And the idea would be to work with law enforcement in a very stressed neighborhood. And with the concept would be that we'll be weeding the criminal elements out of that neighborhood. But the other component of that is that after you weed out the bad elements, you have to plant the seed. And the seed at that point was making sure that we were providing access to capital for small entrepreneurs to be successful. So one of my first initiatives, believe it or not, was actually providing funding to Community First Fund to be able to launch a micro lending program in Berks County. So from there, I eventually became one of its board members, became engaged in their passion and the mission for working with small entrepreneurs. And not only just small entrepreneurs, because I think the organization actually has evolved in actually providing low-income housing, providing affordable fresh foods also in neighborhoods who have food deserts. And then eventually, as of October of last year, I was recruited to really lead a very interesting project, which is the launching of the Community First Fund Federal Credit Union.
So it's interesting to kind of talk about, again, back into the history. Was it originally conceived as a CDFI, or did that come later?
I believe, and I would have to check the records. I know that it was launched as a community development organization. I think the concept of the CDFI actually, it was during the Clinton administration. It was formalized. So, it has been going through, different evolutions or different technical changes. But I think that once it became a CDFI, the organization was able to tap into some resources, especially at the federal level, to be able to do the work that it's doing right now.
I mean, we've talked to a couple of different CDFIs, and they all kind of take their own slant at it, at least as far as like the programs that are available. Because some of them it's straight up capital. It's
Right.
Essentially reducing their cost of capital or getting grants on what they're doing to kind of take some of the equity that they have to bring into it down. Some are on technical and development grants as far as what they're able to invest in from an infrastructure standpoint. But it sounds like primarily the legacy here is as a lending organization, like what Community First has done and like their approach. So talk a little bit about that. What some of the programs are, particularly the one
Sure.
around fresh food, because that's
Sure.
unusual. You don't usually see that as like one of the core values of a financial institution.
Correct. And and let me start by saying that I think it's important to be able for those individuals that listen to or see this podcast to understand the nature of what a CDFI is, right? It's a community development financial institution. to a lot of folks, that doesn't mean anything unless you kind of like put it in context. And the best way that I can describe a CDFI is basically to say it's a non-profit commercial bank. And so the difference between what a CDFI does and let's say what a commercial bank would do is that when we lend money either to an individual or to a community for that matter, when we make those investments, we actually track what that community impact would be. So if we get, Jonathan Encarnacion, a small entrepreneur that wants to borrow money, not only do we look at the individual as a way of underwriting that loan, but we also look at what is the community impact that that's going to have in the community where that individual is located. And that's why I mentioned, food deserts, because one of the areas that we like to focus on is what they call social determinants of health. Now, what does that mean? That means that when you look at your own health, for example, probably your doctor may be able to impact about 20%. The other 80% are those peripheral issues that are impacting you. Where do you access your food? Do you have access to transportation? Do you have access to affordable housing? Do you have access to, capital? In this case, being able to have a checking account or savings account, so on and so forth, because, there's a branch near you. So one of the projects I think that we are very excited about is the fact that as a CDFI, we're able to tap into what they call new market tax credits. A new market tax credit can actually lower a project by a factor sometimes of 25, even 30%. So when you put together a capital stack, right, and I can use as an example projects that we have going on right now in Reading, where we have one of probably the largest Latino grocer who is building a tremendous facility in downtown Reading. That's about probably close to a $6 million project right now. That's going to bring affordable, fresh foods to an area basically that has a food desert right now. So it's not only, like I said, not only working with the individual, but also addressing those needs that the community has at this place. In addition to that, we also are working with another project, same community, also in Berks County, that is also rehabbing an old hospital in downtown Reading, so that Penn State Hershey and a federally qualified health clinic can provide access to affordable health care. And that's what I'm saying when I talk about social determinants of health, right? It's not just providing capital or providing, the capital stack that is needed for a project. At the end of the day, we have to quantify what is the community impact that we're having. And that's really goes to the core of the mission of what a CDFI is, because at the end of the day, Rich, we are a 501c3, we're a charitable organization. And so we are a non-profit commercial bank, but we are mission driven. So that means that, again, when we make those investments, we have to make sure that we are tackling, that we are addressing our mission at the core.
So how do you find projects then, which are as diverse as housing to groceries to health clinics? How do you identify opportunities and find the entrepreneurs and the other organizations that are going to actually do the work in the community and like execute on the project?
Well, that's a great question. In many cases, sometimes our clients are not even entrepreneurs. Sometimes, most of the times, are other nonprofits. For example, we have a nonprofit in Philadelphia, North Philly, ASE. Also another Latino-led, CDC, Community Development Corporation, that is focusing on not only affordable housing, but also housing for seniors. And so we all have partnered, again, also with that CDC to provide, again, new market tax credits, provide access to capital so that they are able to provide and build and develop the type of housing that is needed in those neighborhoods. And, anyone that has been paying attention to the housing crisis right now in the U.S., especially in Pennsylvania, that the market is extremely hot. We know that the housing stock is very tight. And at the same time, also rental prices have gone through the roof right after COVID. So we have a situation right now where there's a housing situation, a housing crisis going on. And to the extent that CDFIs like Community First Fund can provide access to capital to those developers, especially nonprofit developers, again, that's when we see how we are able then to really impact communities that really need that level of development.
So on the front end side, you've done a great job laying out like what makes you unique and different. Is there anything on the back side, anything about how you raise capital or how you put this together that's unique or different? You already said you're a CDFI, which makes certain grants available to you and anything. But is there anything else in like the capital structure or the other partners that you have on the money
No,
side
absolutely.
that's unique or different? Yeah.
Absolutely. No, we also partner with financial institutions, many of them pretty large sized bank, but we have to keep in mind that a lot of times when they make a debt equity investment into the CDFI, that means that they lend us money that would then turn around and have to relend. That's still debt that at some point we would have to repay back to those financial institution, and we do capitalize that. And like I said, we do build on that capital stack, but we also relied on those grants, which are needed to be able to subsidize again the cost of the work that we're doing. Keep in mind that the level of risk that we take is something that a commercial bank will never do, right? And so when we work with an entrepreneur that is launching a new venture that has no experience doing that level of work, especially in the restaurant business, believe it or not, most commercial banks don't like the line of work. Very risky, very short term in terms of the lifespan. And so when the community first fund goes in there making this loan, we're assuming the risk. We had the debt from those capital investments, and then at the end of the day, we have to be able to subsidize those projects, and that's where we have to balance that equation in making sure that we get access to those grants or access to individuals who want to just donate their resources to this organization.
So are you providing credit or access to CRA projects to your funding? Like do they come to you and other CDCs in order to all the home to stuff and like to meet all those requirements?
Absolutely. There's another organization out of Philadelphia called Esperanza, and they run a number of charter schools. And right now, we're also providing access to capital to that nonprofit organization to, again, also put in place charter school. And again, going back to my comment about social determinants of health, education is one of those domains that's also very incredibly important. So again, when you look at the portfolio of the work that we have done, especially partnering with those anchor institutions that do work in very stressed community, you will see that we have funded federally qualified health clinic to provide access to healthcare. We have provided loans to many charter schools throughout the region, whether it's La Academia in Lancaster, or whether it was iLead in Berks County, or whether it's Esperanza in Philadelphia. We have provided numbers of loans to CDCs that are providing CRA type of housing or just housing period to make sure that there's affordable rental units available to individuals. And then the last one that I want to mention is what I said before about affordable groceries to neighborhoods who are very stressed. So again, I mean, that I think speaks to the reason why we exist and the reason why we do the kind of work that we do on a daily basis.
Now, you had done work with an organization called Finanta in the late aughts, late teens, right? And eventually merged with them in 2020, correct? Okay.
Correct.
What was the impetus for that, or like why did that make sense at that time?
Yeah, this is an organization, again, that was providing very small loans, what we call micro-lending opportunities to entrepreneurs. And as a CDFI, I think we went in to help another CDFI institution that needed access to capital so that they can scale up the work that they were doing. I think the relationship became so close and the mission, I think, became so aligned that at the right time, I think we decided to merge and incorporate the work that they were doing. One of the unique things that Finanta was providing in Philadelphia was residential mortgages, what they call IT mortgages, mostly to an immigrant community from Mexico. These are individuals that come into the community that are hard workers. They do accumulate, quite a bit in terms of liquid assets. And what we have seen is that typically that would put down 20% to buy the properties. They will come in And again, trying to fulfill the American dream, right? Buy a home. And the problem that some of the traditional banks or mortgage companies will run into is that they did not have the proper documentation according to those policies they have in those financial institutions to be able to purchase a home. With Finanta and through Community First Fund, we can do that with a tax ID, what they call an I-10, right? We can utilize the documentation that they have from their country of origin, and as the first immigrant, we can actually set them up with that I-10, be able to underwrite the loan, and be able to provide them with a mortgage. Now, keep in mind that those loans are amortized sometimes 20 to 30 years. They are non-conforming loans, which means that we have to portfolio, right, those mortgages in the house, which means that we need to then generate more capital to be able to sustain that product. I can tell you that product has been so successful that we don't even have to market that product in Philadelphia. Just by word of mouth, people keep coming to us, and we keep utilizing all the resources that we have to make that a reality.
So that expansion into more consumer-based services and products that apparently has eventually led to you starting your own deposit institution, your own credit union. What was really the impetus for that? Like, how does that jive with your mission and kind of where, maybe outside of where you historically had worked?
Yeah, I think what we noticed is that I think many of our clients who were able to access those commercial loans, they really have no place to put in their deposits, and so from a retail perspective, that's number one. But I think number two, I think we also realize that when we look at the demographic that we're serving, especially low income, people of color, Latinos, African Americans, Asians, and so on, we realize that there's a high percentage of individuals that are being unbanked or underbanked at this time. And then also the other phenomenon I think that has been happening is that many of those financial institutions, what we call mainstream financial institutions, have been closing branches. And so when we look at access to financial institutions, it has been declining. And I just want to share some data with you real quickly, if I may. But if we look at from like 2009 through, let's say, 2019, about 13% of all branches in the U.S. have closed. That's a striking number. If you bring it down to just the state of Pennsylvania, just to give an example, they basically went from, and again, this is since the pandemic, just looking at like around 2019, about 339 branches, or if you want to put a percentage in there, 9% of those branches have closed. And then in Pennsylvania, also in general, about 13% of all commercial branches have closed, which means that, and again, part of that, understand that it's technology. There's more online banking. But when you look at someone who's a recent immigrant into the U.S., or when you look at someone who is not financial literate, or when you look at someone who has some challenges navigating, like a senior, for example, navigating an app on the phone, not having a branch creates all kinds of issues. So that's when we then had an opportunity to talk to Mackenzie Scott. I don't know if for many of you that name resonates very well, but in this case, we're talking about Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. But we got the call from her foundation, and they approached Community First Fund, and they asked the question, do you have any big projects in the horizon? And of course, we say we do. We have a dream and we have the passion to be able to launch a credit union. Well, guess what? That resulted in a $10 million infusion of capital in the form of a grant to be able for us to be able to launch this credit union. So around 2.5 years ago, we created a proof of concept in the county of Lancaster. And to date, we have close to 1,000 members. We have close to about a $10 million in asset organization. We have closed over $2 million in loans, and we have about $4 million in deposit. I also want to mention that because we are interested, again, at the end of the day, in being able to impact the communities that we served. We just did not go ahead and just launch the credit union. We wanted to launch a very unique credit union that was something very different. So what did we do? We went after what they call a low-income designation credit union. And also we went after what they call an MDI designation, a minority designated institution, to be able to serve a specific demographic. Beyond that, we also went out and connected with an individual who launched a credit union in North Carolina called the Latino Credit Union. And why did we do that? Because we wanted to replicate a model that has been very successful. When this gentleman started that credit union, he started maybe like a multi-million-dollar credit union, 5 or 10 million. By the time he was done with it, close to $1 billion in assets. What does that tell us? It tells us that when we look at the low-income minority demographic that we're looking at, we can do two things. We can provide access to those retail products that they need, but we also can build an organization that could be sustainable, right? So the business model would be that we wanted to create a pathways to financial well-being and stability. And so when you look at the model that we put in place, any individual at any point in time can actually jump into that pathways. And what do I mean by the pathways? For example, if you have an individual that has bounced too many checks and that individual was reported to the credit bureau and as a result is not able to, put in place an account, we actually do have a product in which we can rehabilitate. It's called a new start. That individual can have a new start to be able to put that account in place. Same thing, we could have a situation with an individual is a recent immigrant, doesn't have any documentation. Our staff is actually able to sign them up with an I-10 online, get them a tax ID, and start a depository relationship with a credit union, and then get them launched into a product. We could have a situation where an individual is a minor. We can then also put that individual into a pathways, right, through a custodial account, so that eventually we can create a pathways for that individual to become, financially stable. We also have situations where individuals don't know how to manage or budget their money. We also have put in place, through another grant that we got from the NEEKC Foundation, a 4-week trading module in Spanish that we actually developed in Spanish, not translated, but actually developed in Spanish to make sure that we are tackling the whole issue of financial literacy, making sure that people understand what does it mean to budget, what does it mean to save money, what does it mean to develop a culture of saving, why do I need to be able to purchase a home, right? So all those things are kind of like flowing through the model that we developed to make sure that it's not just here's a checking account or here's a savings account, but what are all the pieces that we need to put in place to make sure that you are going to be successful financially at the end of the day? How do we create wealth within those communities that really need that leg up?
So right now you have a single branch that's in Lancaster, correct?
Lancaster, yes,
kind of
correct.
Like dead center middle of where your target area is.
Yes.
Are the members that you're targeting or going after, are they the same that the rest of the CDFI is focusing on, or is this considered like net new territory? I mean, it's obviously new products, but as far as the community and the people that you're trying to serve, is this new, or does it overlap somewhat with
I think it
the
overlaps.
legacy business?
Yeah, I think it overlaps. I think it's actually a mixture of both. But I because I think the concept is so new, right? And keep in mind also the other thing that I want to mention, that in Latin America, the whole concept of a credit union, what they call the cooperativas, is something that resonates a lot with the Latino community. In fact, I think we look at places, especially in South America, where they actually have what they call commercial cooperativas or commercial credit unions, where collectives come together, especially in the coffee industry. The whole notion of a credit union really resonates. Now, why do I mention that? I mention that because in a credit union, again, unlike a bank, the members of the credit unions are shareholders of the credit union, right? And, again, that's a concept that a lot of people don't get, that when you become a member of a credit union, you literally have a vote in the governance of that institution. And that's something that's, again, it's a completely different animal. It's a completely different structure that people are not used to. especially the younger generation, I think here in the United States still don't understand what's the value add or what's the value proposition behind a credit union. But when we talk to our members, we have to make sure that they understand this is your building, this is your institution, this is your organization. You own it. It's yours. And it's for your benefit. And so that creates kind of like a different, paradigm that people can really identify as their credit union. And because of that, I think we have been extremely successful, I think, so far in Lancaster. And I know that as we launch in Reading, which we are proposing to do that hopefully by the end of 2024, and then looking beyond that, 2025, Philadelphia, I think that this model, emphasizing what I said before, one of its kind in terms of its low income and MDI designation, that we know that we're going to be able to make an impact in the communities of color, and that we know that we can make this institution sustainable, financially sustainable for the long term.
Well, Jonathan, this is a really interesting story and a unique approach that we haven't seen before as far as how you've done this and the way you're going about it. If anybody's interested more in you or more about the fund or the credit union in particular, where do they go to learn more?
I urge you just a quick Google search on communityfirstfund.org or Community First Fund Federal Credit Union. That's going to pop up. You're going to see our information there. You're going to see our community impact reports. I really encourage your audience to look at the community impact reports, which, by the way, I wanted to say that we have done that for the loan fund for many years. We are in the process of doing the same for the credit union. This will be very different as well. You're not going to find anywhere any other credit union in Pennsylvania that's actually tracking community impact. They usually track numbers in terms of what they do for loans and products. They're not going to be tracking community impact. That's something that's going to be very unique and very different about our credit union.
And we'll definitely put a link in the show notes to your impact report. Jonathan, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.